Hank woke up one morning to find that his phone had registered 10 missed calls and an equal number of voicemail messages, all from an unfamiliar area code. Having dealt with numerous spam calls from Chinese robo-marketers, Hank had set his phone to send calls from unknown numbers straight to voicemail. Typically, these spam calls never left messages. His daughters were still asleep, so he decided to listen to the messages. To his shock, he learned that his wife Randy was not in Jacksonville, Florida, visiting her parents and sister as she had told him. Instead, she was in a hospital burn unit in Boulder, Colorado. Hank paused in silence, trying to process this information. At the same time, his phone was buzzing with news updates. Usually, he found these notifications annoying, but he had never bothered to disable them. One headline about a fire stuck in his mind. He remembered seeing something about a fire in Boulder that morning. He checked his phone and saw the news headline, "Devastating Forest Fire Destroys Boulder Suburb Overnight." Hank, who often admitted he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, could only think of one reason why Randy would lie about her weekend plans. He intentionally slowed his pace, deciding there was no need to rush. He made coffee, knowing his daughters wouldn't be up for at least another hour. He then brought coffee to Randy's workspace in the dining room and grabbed her laptop. It turned out it was now password protected with a password he didn't know. However, Randy was scatterbrained and lazy, so he searched for a written password and found it on a scrap of paper in a small writing desk drawer. Upon gaining access, he discovered that Randy hadn't even closed her email browser. She had merely shut down the computer, relying on the new password and her confidence that Hank wouldn't invade her privacy. But this morning, all those assumptions no longer applied. Everything had changed. Hank discovered that Randy had been seeing her college ex-boyfriend, Josh Turner, at his house in Boulder on weekends when Josh's wife was away. Josh was the same guy who had broken Randy's heart by falling in love with and marrying another woman. Over the years, it seemed Josh had developed guilt about abandoning Randy, or perhaps it was just lust. The emails didn't contain many details, mostly confirmations of arrival times. Hank speculated that they poured their hearts out to each other over the phone. One surprising fact emerged: her parents and sister knew about the affair and agreed to cover it up. They even thought Randy should marry Josh, whose family had money. These details were not in the emails but in open chats that were also left unlocked. Hank felt frozen, as if watching a car crash in slow motion and unable to look away. He took a deep breath to calm down, needing to keep himself from punching holes in the drywall. He called the hospital in Boulder and instinctively asked if Josh Turner was a patient. When the operator asked him to define his relationship with Mr. Turner, Hank said he was a friend. The operator's refusal to provide information confirmed that Josh Turner was indeed a patient. Next, Hank called the number left in his voicemail. It was a direct line to the hospital's reception. After introducing himself, the clerk informed him that Randy had been admitted with third-degree burns over 80% of her body, including lung damage from smoke inhalation. The fire had erupted suddenly in the drought-stricken area, spreading rapidly in strong winds and cutting off the only escape route. Over 100 homes were burned and destroyed. In disbelief, Hank said, "This can't be my wife. She's in Jacksonville, Florida. You must have incorrect information." Hank hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the situation in Boulder. Despite the tension, he wasn't going to make it easy for anyone. He checked his wife's computer again and found Josh's social media page. Randy had indeed added Josh as one of her friends. There, he discovered a public message from Josh's wife, Tina, asking for prayers from their home in San Diego. She had just learned that her husband had been hospitalized with severe burns. Hank, filled with a desire for vengeance, thought it was time for those prayers to be answered. He contacted Josh's wife, Tina, via chat to introduce himself and share what he had found, leaving his phone number. After finishing his coffee, Hank noticed another missed call from an unrecognized number with a voicemail from Tina. When he called her back, their conversation was strained. "Is your name really Tina?" Hank asked. "Yes," she sighed. "When I got married, there was a fear this would happen to the woman Josh rejected. I'm married for love, but now it's just a complete breakdown. You must be Randy's husband. I knew about her when Josh and I met. Lately, he's been acting strangely, but I didn't understand why. Now it all makes sense. Do you feel the same way?" Hank asked. "Kind of. I knew about Josh, but Randy didn't behave suspiciously, so I didn't notice anything." "You're taking it calmly, Hank." "You're talking calmly too," Tina remarked. "I take pills," she admitted. "Josh is badly burned. They've already put him in a medically induced coma. I lost my composure when I heard that. Now I'm just in shock, especially knowing the truth about what really happened." "What's your wife's story?" Hank inquired. "Severely burned. That's all I know. I told them it couldn't be her because my wife is in Florida. Tina chuckled. Oh, the hospital is calling again. Let me answer and stay in touch. She hung up, and Hank saved her number in his contacts to prevent the spam blocker from sending her call to voicemail. A new call came in from Randy's father, Bob. Hank and Bob had never liked each other but maintained a facade of politeness. Now, politeness seemed absent. Hank, have you heard from Randy? Bob asked. Why would I hear from her? She's upstairs in her old room, isn't she? Spending time with you, your wayward wife, and your other daughter? Hank retorted. Bob sighed. Hank, she really loves you. I know we've never gotten along. Hank interrupted, his voice getting louder. This is nonsense. I understand perfectly well that I never pleased you. You were sure I wasn't worthy of your daughter, but Josh was. Your wife and your other daughter treated me horribly too. I put up with it to keep the peace, but now it's over. If you were standing in front of me right now, I'd punch you in the mouth until you spat out teeth. Damn you and your family too. Hank hung up and immediately blocked Bob's number as well as those of his mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Why are you yelling, Dad? His daughter Nicole asked, entering the kitchen with her younger sister Rebecca. Dad said a bad word, Rebecca announced. Really? Nicole asked. Say it again, Dad. I didn't hear it. Hank smiled. What was the bad word, Becky? I can't remember, she frowned. You probably misheard. Now, let's have breakfast. Today is pancake day. Each of them had 3 pancakes and some orange juice, then the girls watched cartoons. It was a typical Saturday morning. The phone rang again. It was Tina Turner. The pills aren't working, she said. What pills? Hank asked. The ones I take to calm down. Well, they're not working. In the hospital, they connected me to where Josh is in intensive care. The nurse put me on speaker. She thought hearing my voice might help Josh, even though he's in a coma. I lost it. I yelled that his girlfriend was also badly burned and probably going to die and that it was his fault. I said after both get life insurance payouts, we're going on a round-the-world cruise and spending all our time in bed to settle the score. His heart almost stopped when he heard me. Even though he's in a coma? Yes. It's hard to say if my scream caused it or if it was just a coincidence, but he pulled through. I'm sorry, she paused. Sorry for what? Are you sorry his heart almost stopped or are you sorry he's still alive? Hank's instincts leaned toward cruelty, but he kept himself in check. Just sorry that things turned out this way. Me too, Hank replied. After a pause, he asked, tell me about this cruise we're going on. Sorry, I don't know where that came from, but I'm still curious. I bet that's true, she paused. Are you really interested, Hank? I've seen on social media that you have a beautiful face, but I haven't really followed you on the internet. If I had to spend time getting revenge, sleeping with someone, you'd be a pretty good choice. Why are you asking? Do I stand a chance? Chance, I don't know if she answered. Hank started slowly, reflecting on how much time he had spent since realizing his wife was cheating. He'd been consumed by self-doubt, constantly wondering what was wrong with him. Seeing that you're interested in me makes me feel a little better. And, honestly, you don't look too bad yourself. Anyway, Hank snorted, thanks. It's nice to hear that, even if my wife clearly preferred your husband. Maybe the problem isn't with us. I think the same, the woman responded. Tina Turner paused, then asked, have you ever wondered why they did this? I guess it's because they thought they could get away with having an affair. That sounds too simple, Hank countered. Well, what else could it be? Tina asked decisively. Listen, we both have a lot to digest, but let's stay in touch. We're the only 2 people who understand what the other is feeling right now. Fine, Hank agreed. I need to buy Bermuda shorts for the cruise and some swim trunks. She chuckled, at least you're making me feel better. Maybe the pills are working. Book a room with a balcony. They both laughed, and then they hung up. As Hank put down the phone, he noticed another voicemail. It was from the hospital again. He called back and was connected with a nurse in his wife's room. She put him on speaker. Mr. Henry Becker, I'm Nurse Young. We're on speaker now. I'm in the intensive care burn unit of the hospital. Your wife is here. She's severely burned and in a medicated coma. She's next to me, and we hope the sound of your voice might help, even though she's unconscious. Hank thought the hospital would need to update its procedures for dealing with patients' families after today. But he had to ask, why do you think I wasn't there when she was brought in? One of my friends was there, the nurse said. She said your wife clamped onto her arm like a vice and wouldn't let go until they realized what she was demanding, call my husband. So sorry. Your wife fought the team with all the strength she had and wouldn't let them do anything until they assured her they would deliver the message. Okay, too little too late, Hank thought. What should I say, he asked. Tell her everything that's on your heart, the nurse naively suggested. All right, thought Hank. The game begins. Listen, you pathetic liar, he shouted over the phone to his wife. I hope you go through agony and spend eternity in hell with Josh, who's also bleeding. Just so you know, I'm going to spend all the life insurance money I get to seduce Josh's wife, and I will never forgive you. The line cut off. The nurse probably didn't listen when he started, but it seemed she snapped out of it. Hank realized that at this rate, he wouldn't achieve his goals in terms of emotional balance. Someday, he would probably feel some guilt for what he said, but today was not that day. Dad, what does the deuce mean? Becky asked, holding her teddy bear. Oh, my little one, Hank said. It means to deceive someone. She pondered this with a serious expression. When will Mom come home? That's what really angered him, the need to tell his daughters what was happening. He should have thought about it carefully, but he wasn't in the mood. As soon as she can, Becky. Becky returned to the living room, and Hank watched as she plopped down in front of the TV. Under no circumstances was he going to take the girls to the hospital in Colorado to see their mother wrapped in bandages like a mummy. He didn't want them to have such memories. 30 minutes later, he had tickets for a week at Disneyland, a reservation at one of Mickey's hotels, and plane tickets. They were flying out the next morning. Nicole would have to miss a little bit of preschool, but so be it. Once he got the tickets, a call came in from the hospital. It turned out that Randy had a heart attack and died. All efforts to save her were in vain. Hank asked when it happened, and it was precisely at the time when he had yelled at her. Maybe he would advise Tina to try yelling at Josh again. No, let her figure it out herself. In the end, Hank had to send Ree's medical insurance information to the hospital to force them to provide him with death documents. He called the local funeral bureau and arranged for her cremation. With her burns, Hank thought he might get a discount, but they told him they would still charge him the full price. He asked them to mail him the ashes after they returned from Disney. While at Disneyland, the girls were sad that their mom wasn't with them, but they cheered up with enough treats from the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique and the excitement of meeting their favorite characters. Josh managed to hold on until Thursday. Tina no longer shouted at him, which perhaps helped him survive a bit longer. After his death, Tina returned to Colorado to live with friends because her house had burned down. She behaved with dignity, like a noble widow, for the sake of her children. She told Hank that she hadn't mentioned Randy to her kids. Tina's children were older than Hank's and knew their father was injured in the fire, making it harder to ignore the situation. Hank's girls, on the other hand, had no idea about the details for a while. Hank continued to maintain a positive spirit but found it challenging not to speak ill of their mother. Shortly after returning from Florida, a delivery guy came to Hank's door with 2 items requiring a signature, a letter from Tina's relatives and a box containing Randy's ashes. The letter requested that Hank provide Randy's remains so they could organize a memorial service and burial in Randy's hometown in Florida, assuming Hank didn't want to arrange something locally. The letter lacked any apologies for concealing Randy's actions, which made Hank's next decision easier to accept. Hank hired a teenage girl from the neighborhood to babysit his children. While the girls narrated their Disney trip to the babysitter, showing off their belongings and photos on a tablet, Hank went to a nearby national park with Randy's ashes. He headed to a remote area of the park, where there were deep cinder block toilets instead of regular bathrooms. Hank photographed himself flushing Randy's ashes down the toilet. As he returned to his car, he considered whether therapy might be beneficial, but he wasn't angry anymore, not angry enough to hurt anyone. Ruining someone's reputation was a different matter. Hank posted a video on social media of him flushing the ashes, with an explanation. Afterward, Hank wondered if the National Park Service would fine him for polluting a vault toilet. If so, he'd gladly pay. He never contacted Randy's relatives, but he later read in the newspaper that they had held a memorial service in Jacksonville without him or his daughters. Hank told his girls that their mom had an accident while away and wouldn't be coming back. They reacted as he expected. Fortunately, their wonderful daycare teachers provided support. The life insurance payout was unexpectedly substantial, easing the restructuring of Hank's work life. He decided his daughters needed more fresh air, especially at playgrounds with many children and attractive young mothers, many of whom sympathized with his tragic story. Hank downplayed Randy's infidelity because he wanted sympathy, not pity. The girls began receiving many playdate invitations, where moms introduced Hank to their cute single friends. Hank began to see a way forward. Hank never met Tina Turner, though they occasionally chatted on the phone.